welcome back to another episode of Byte Size Buyers, the podcast that brings you the latest in technology news from the unique perspective of global technology procurement experts. We're your hosts. I'm Sam Harris.
And I'm Nick Wagstaff.
And this week we'll be covering the UK-India trade deal, the ongoing cyber issues for retailers, now including Marks & Spencer's, Co-op and Harrods. And we'll round off with Microsoft's announcement of custom SaaS payment plans. What does that mean for end users? So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so first up today, we have the announcement from yesterday at the time of recording. So on the 6th of May, the announcement of the UK and India trade deal. There's been a lot of stories in the press already about this. A lot quick to bring political angles into this, but my interest here obviously naturally is on the technology side of things and the strengthening of ties between the UK and India and the impact that that's going to have on the technology industry.
So I've got a question for you then. So, because I had a quick look at this, doesn't seem anything obvious around technology and the tie-in. It mentioned whiskey and all sorts of things. So what is it? What's the tech angle then that you've seen on this one?
I think that's just your priorities, isn't it? Whiskey, gin.
Yeah.
No, look, I think in terms of you have to dig a little bit to find some of the technology angles. The key first one I think in there is around mobility. So part of the agreement is around the movement of workers between the two countries. So in the intercompany moves or sort of intra-company, so within your own organization, moving from being based out of, say, Hyderabad to work out of a delivery center in London,
right,
Leeds, Manchester, etc. And that being able to freely move within certain bounds is big. Obviously, years gone by, it will be referred to as landed resource.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think there's going to be a change in that then? Could you see more of that?
Potentially slightly more. I mean, a lot of the organisations now have been doing that for a long time anyway. Yeah. It's why you very rarely see landed rate cards anymore. And look, to be fair, there are a few organisations who are doing it and were still maintaining their onshore rate cards. But at the same time, they weren't actually paying the workers the same rates. They were bringing them over from India, keeping them on Indian employment contracts, and then billing out at sort of UK, US, or other onshore location rates at times. Yeah. It was actually, I think Cognizant were one of the first organizations who actually decided to move those workers onto local employment contracts and move away from the landed model. Yeah. But we've now seen other organizations follow suit as well. Will we see a big boost in numbers? I think potentially, yes. I think we'll see some. I think it makes it more of an open avenue for high quality candidates from India to look to move to delivery centers within onshore locations, which I think is actually really good for both customer and for the supplier as well, in terms of developing that talent and showing that pathway through that success pathway. I think that's really important. There's been a lot of noise here, though, around national insurance contributions. I just want to touch on this really quickly.
Yeah.
So what they've said is that for the first 3 years or up to 3 years, if you were to come to the UK for a temporary assignment or on a short-term working visa, you will not have to pay national insurance contributions. And I'm not going to draw us into a political debate here.
Yep.
The one point I would make here is those workers will still pay national insurance contributions or equivalent in India, and they won't have access to services that national insurance historically has covered. Things like the NHS will not be free at the point of use. So I think it's been blown out of proportion, really. I'm seeing this as an overall very positive step for both India and the UK.
Yeah. I just wonder if there's something there as well in terms, do you think the UK might become a bit of a hub then, a bit more of a hub from a European perspective, where companies and customers would have sort of said, look, we'll outsource someone offshore or near shore, and there might be an opportunity to get better rates out the UK. So
It's a great point, right? And there's two angles I think on that. One is let's factor in a little bit here the tariffs and the situation in the US. One of the
yeah,
reasons it's believed this deal finally got over the line was that both India and the UK were prepared to make a couple of key concessions because of the impending impact of the tariffs in the US is going to have on both countries. And I think, therefore, what this potentially does is where we've spoken before about the freeing of capacity in locations like India in these IT service providers. It may well be that the UK becomes a natural home, to your point, and it becomes a hub of real strong talent.
Yeah.
The other thing, interestingly, is, and this will come as a surprise to quite a few listeners, I'm sure, but when it comes to a professional services angle, if you look at the rates associated with the UK, we're actually one of the cheaper countries in Western Europe.
Right.
And part of that's cost of living and numerous other things that go into that. So for example, in Germany, there's a part of it's linked to taxation and other things. Yeah. However, we are one of the cheaper locations. And if you're moving resources and workers from India, as an example, and bringing to the UK and setting up, say, a new delivery centre in Bradford or Stoke-on-Trent or Hull or, these some of the more northern towns.
Newly promoted Bradford.
Say that again?
Newly promoted Bradford.
Congratulations to Bradford City. For those listening, Nick is sadly a part-time Bradford City fan. Congratulations to Leeds as well, to Dirty Leeds, for promotion back to the Premier League.
Skip that one.
But yeah, there's a real opportunity here for the UK to become a hub of talent, and I think
it does feel like that, doesn't it? Yeah, it feels like there's definitely a bit of there's a shift there, and if it's done right, it's done well, it could be a real opportunity, I think, not just from a UK perspective, but all for European clients, customers, that type of thing, to tap into that. So yeah, it could be a good one to watch this.
Definitely, and the last point, just quickly on this, is around the digitally delivered services. So other services that are provided at the moment within India, for example, if you look at things around engineering, computer-based services, telco, this could open up opportunities for Indian companies to expand services into the UK market and vice versa as well.
Yeah.
It's also opened up the opportunity for UK service providers to win work in India, which might seem sort of and it is a lesser benefit, if you want, in terms of the actual value of services between the two countries, but it does open a new frontier as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I think from a technology, a deep tech perspective, I think it's definitely that angle. I think we always think of India in terms of Indian tech as about being cheaper resource and stuff, but there's a lot of tech in both parts, aren't there? In terms of companies driving. I saw something recently where they were looking at chip manufacture in India, or a couple of companies were looking at doing it. They haven't really progressed it, but they're certainly on the radar.
Yeah. Yeah, look, in India projected to become the third largest economy in the next 3 years. Yeah. From number 5 to number 3, they're on the rise. And I'm gonna say it again. Every time it's mentioned, I'm gonna say this. So apologies for being a broken record. The suggestion that Indian resource from an IT services perspective is in any way lower quality or lower capability is just simply ridiculous. Yeah. They've been a market leader since the early 90s. You could argue late 80s, but the early 90s they've pushed through. Yes, there was a phase where it was seen as a stack it high, sell it cheap. Very cheap resource, very good for basic tasks, but potentially not the more complex. They've been doing it for 40 years.
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore.
They're well advanced now, and if you ranked countries, for me personally, if I was ranking countries in terms of technology capability in the IT services space, India would certainly be in the top 3.
Okay, our next topic, just sort of following on something I know we've discussed a couple of times recently about the ongoing cyber attacks. Specifically in the UK, specifically seem to be targeting retail. I know there's a couple of stories around the government stepping in to support and provide that. And just really to sort of just have a chat about where we think, what's the driver behind this? Is it that they're targeting these companies because they're vulnerable? Is it's good news worthiness? And then one of our colleagues had released put an article out around sort of the change in remote working and how that can be an example of vulnerability. And again, that's something we discussed previously about that drive to back to the office. So is this another component of that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great point and a great article from Jill over the last few days, as you mentioned there on that exact topic. Yeah, naturally more control if you're in an office environment, and it'll be seen as being easier or potentially less risky. There are other ways to fix that as well, but yeah, I can see the drive there. I think what's interesting. It'd be great to get your view on. Do you think that retailers are being targeted because of their historically mixed estate in terms of the hybrid, on-prem, cloud? They're early, they're relatively late adopters in some cases of cloud-based tech. Do you think it's because actually it's maximum impact because consumers feel it straight away, therefore the hackers can have a big impact straight away? Do you think it's because they're more likely to pay out on ransomware?
Yeah,
What do you think it
I think
is?
there's a combination. It's probably all of those things. I think equally, and this is not to demean sort of the retail sector, but they tend to be margins are tighter. They tend to spend less on technology, even though it's certainly compared to like pharma and financial services, those sort of industries. So I think that could be a factor as well that goes into it. But I think it's probably a combination of those things of high profile, you know, lack of sort of investment in terms of that, a combination of legacy systems and a requirement to move to new technology because that's what customers demand, um, and lots and lots and lots of customer interaction. So lots of sort of potential gaps and sort of holes that you can try and sort of weed your way in. So I think it's probably a combination of all of those things. Um, and, it's good news as well, or a big news story. So there is that because everybody recognizes, if there's a cyber attack on an engineering firm that nobody's ever heard of, or
Yeah,
even a financial services company that, might have some pension info or that type of stuff, still very sort of real, but not as newsworthy as,
yeah.
big retailers.
Yeah, of course. I tell you what I found interesting on this one was the group behind these attacks has openly admitted that it's Marks and Spencers, it's Co-op. And we've seen the ongoing effects for Co-op even today, with contactless payments not working, shelves emptying. But the third one was Harrods. Now, that was an unsuccessful attempt, as we're led to believe. There's been no claim made by anybody that they successfully managed to breach the defences at Harrods. And does that, to your point before here around margins and around focus for organisations, a company like Harrods rely very heavily on they have an exclusive client base.
Yeah.
They cater for a certain element of society. Those people who are probably far more concerned about their details
Yeah, yeah.
being taken and potentially used for ill purposes. Do you think that then is playing something into this as well?
Could well be. I mean, we're not privy to, their sort of IT spend and budgets and stuff like that, but it's a good assumption to make. And I think, it's an interesting going back to the angle around, the sort of the pushback to getting people in the office. I mean, I'm not sure that's really, the big drive behind this because even when I first started, with a laptop which weighed about 3 tons, many, many years ago, I could still sort of dial in, even though it was pretty garbage from home. So I'm not, I think there's definitely an angle there. But I think it's like with anything, there's never just one thing. There's always lots and lots of sort of components to these things. And I think the hackers have sort of seen a vulnerability. They're probably redoing the same thing and seeing
Yeah,
that this has worked, and then applying it to different organisations in the same sector.
The one thing I would just like to comment on really quickly on this is Marks and Spencers were very open from the outset around the attack, and they were as honest as they could be at the time with the information to their customers.
And I think they handled the comms really well. Actually, I think it got
completely agree, and I think they should be commended for that. And I think in this era, it's really important that we're open and honest and transparent. And who knows, that may well have triggered something at Harrods that would have said, okay, there's an increased threat in the market. You know, I don't know that, but it may well have done. And for other retailers, I'm sure they're on a heightened sense of alert at the moment. Now, Co-op have suffered the same fate from the same group, we believe, with the same attack. And the one difference here for me is, and this goes slightly back to the Oracle situation a few weeks back as well, there was a denial that customer data had been compromised. And it was the hackers who came out and proved they had the data that forced Co-op into changing their angle on that.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me, that as you said before, M&S handled the comms so well. I think this is two sides of the coin here. This is how to handle comms well and how not to handle comms very well.
Yeah. I think with anything like this, there's loads of lessons to learn, and the lessons to learn in terms of how to look at your vulnerabilities, how to sort of protect yourself, but also how to deal with it, you know, and how to sort of deal with that situation. We've seen some good examples, we've seen some poor examples. It's a bit like politics, isn't it? You know, it wasn't me. Oh, here's the picture.
That was Shaggy,
it was
wasn't
me. Yeah, yeah, him as well.
Okay, so finally today we have the news that Microsoft have launched custom SaaS payment plans. So off the back of a very strong quarter, that's made a lot of investors, particularly in the US, I think, particularly happy. Microsoft have announced that now customers will be able to, through their channel partners, receive private pricing plans that allow them to pay in installments. So, for example, one of the examples that Microsoft gave themselves was a customer agrees to acquire Microsoft goodies over a 2-year period. They could pay nothing for the first 2 months. They could then pay 10 million to cover the first year. They could then make 2 further installments of 10 million and 5 million at different times during the second year.
Yep.
Or in a single year deal, you have a $10 million deal. You pay 2 million in the first and third quarters. You pay 3 million in the second and fourth. Now, why? I mean, what's this for? I think the first key thing here, right, is around the seasonality debate. We just spoke about retailers before.
Yeah.
For a lot of companies, they make money at Christmas or around the festive period, you know, the November, December, January, a period of the peak trading period. But for the rest of the year, they don't make as much, or some companies actually make losses through the rest of the year. So being able to pay at a time where cash flow is better makes a lot of sense and can help a lot of organizations. But it feels like there's another angle here. It feels like there's something else going on.
Do you think this is a bit of a positioning piece from Microsoft to make it attractive? Because we know that they're changing their model. You know, they're going through a change in terms of more use of partners and that type of thing. To say, and I like it. I think it's good. Anything that can provide flexibility is good. You know. But is it? Do you think it's more of a look? We're being overly flexible now, just sort of to entice, this into this partner model to make you not be concerned about going down this route.
Look, I'm going to put my skeptical hat on again, which you'll be very surprised about. Part of me feels like, are they playing a game here with other SaaS suppliers? Are they going, well, look, we're able to do it.
Yeah, we're flexible. Yeah.
What are you doing, Salesforce? What are you doing, SAP? What are you doing? Going to the market leaders. Now, there'll be a number of organizations, the ones I just mentioned there, for example, who cash flow is not going to be a particular problem for necessarily, and therefore potentially could mirror something like this. But there will be a number of organizations where they won't be able to offer something like this, and actually could set a precedent that they can't follow. I think as well, the thought I've always got when it comes to payment terms, and we have this debate with clients all the time, around.
Yeah.
And it's normally if you're in Europe, it's normally between 60 and 90 days or 30 to 90 days. If you're in the US, it can be 120 days and sometimes slightly higher. But this, in effect, is putting payment terms potentially out to 12 months. There's going to be a cost attached, right? Surely there's going to be some sort of benefit here to paying early and upfront rather than.
I mean, you think of it this way: Microsoft's not short of cash either, right? So they can probably afford it, and they'll probably do something with their partners, so they'll bear some of the burden, I would imagine. So it's probably a combination of those things that go right. Well, and yeah, I think we are procurement people. We're always naturally skeptical, aren't we, over everything. So I think you're always thinking about what the angle, and I think it's a good point. Is it going to sort of be an increase in pricing? Is it going to be that thing of saying, actually, this is why your products are going up because we offer all these things here, and you say, well, I don't want that, and it might be an opportunity to negotiate an extra discount. If you can sort of say, well, look, I'm willing to pay, which is better for you, Microsoft, then I get an extra X number of points discount on that. So there could be a few angles on here, but yeah, it's an interesting one. I do like your point around. Is it a sort of a tester to the other software companies to say, right, well, we're doing this. What are you doing?
So that concludes another episode of Byte Size Buyers. As always, guys, if you've made it to this point, then thank you very much for listening and sticking with us. We'll be back at the same time next week as always. If you've got any stories that you'd like to hear us cover, or if you've got any comments on the stories we've covered today, then please do let us know down below. If you've enjoyed this episode, or if you've enjoyed a previous episode, then please do support us as well by giving us a thumbs up and subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. I've been Sam Harris.
And I've been Nick Wagstaff.
Until next time.